All right, if I could have your attention, thank you so much for coming on this bright, sunshiny day. This is going to be our first class on how to raise water buffalo. Just seeing if you're paying attention. What I've done is, Laura came to me a while back and asked me if I thought that we should do a Vietnam, not a Vietnam, but a veterans GAM. I thought it was a great idea. Some of you know these two gentlemen up here. This is Joe LaBlanc and Patrick Topham. What I wanted to do was get away from Vietnam and all of the stuff that we've gone through before and concentrate on our young men and young women that are dealing with the Middle East right now. We see them on TV when dad comes home or mom comes home and the kids are all waiting there, or the wife or the husband's waiting there for them. It makes you cry. It makes me cry. And I'm 71 years old and a Marine.
That explains it.
Exactly. So these are real people. And it's unlike any other war that we've ever done if you think about it. World War I, we went to war and we stayed there. As far as the military people, we stayed there until the war was over. World War II is the same way. Unless you were injured or something, you stayed there, you were there for the duration of the war. Vietnam started to change that. First of all, we've never had TVs and cameras and all this other stuff going on like we had in Vietnam. Never in World War I and World War II. That's why I was so glad when General Schwarzkopf said to the media when we went into Desert Storm, he said, "No, you're not coming with us. You stay right here in this tent. I'll come back and tell you what's going on. You don't need to be there," which was a smart move. I can tell you some stories down the road a little bit after these gentlemen address it. I don't really want to talk about Vietnam. It doesn't bother me, but it used to, but it doesn't anymore. I'd really like to focus on the young men and women that we have out there today in the Middle East. And I was lucky enough to get 2 of them. I had 3 or 4 here. At one time I had 12 listed, and Laura said, "No, we can't have 12. We'll be here until 8:30 tonight talking." So I'm not going to talk a whole bunch. I know that that's strange because I like to talk, but I would like to introduce our guest, Patrick Topham. He's in charge of the FAA out here. Joseph LaBlanc, he's a mechanic here in the island. And both of these young men are going to tell you the stories. Hopefully somebody else shows up and we'll have another story. You're welcome to ask any questions of me or the gentleman here, and have them come up and tell you their story, what they went through, where they came from, and where they went to. And it's not just about people that went overseas to war. It's about people that have served the United States of America, period. You could have been stationed in Anchorage, Alaska for 6 years, serving, and you're away from your family, and it matters. So, Patrick.
Hey, Gunny.
How you doing?
Good. So where would you like me to start?
You just start from when you decided to
So for those of you who don't know me, one of 7, Jeanette's favorite, third son, 5th child, born and raised on Nantucket, had grandfather and uncle, both who served, and I felt going through high school that it was something I wanted to do. I actually met Gunny when I was probably about 15 or 16. So it was always just kind of a call to service, and I quite honestly knew if I went to college, I probably wouldn't have lasted very long. Someone can agree.
That true, Bob?
So when I was actually 17 at the old Compass Rose, I guess it was the airport, signed my delayed entry papers. My parents had to sign. My mother tried to talk me out. She wanted me to go ROTC, and I wanted nothing to do with being an officer or ROTC. So 20 days after I graduated high school, I was in Paris Island with my head shaved and going through boot camp. Fast forward, was stationed in Washington State for a couple years on a Navy nuclear sub base, guarding nuclear weapons, doing on and off loads of nuclear missiles. And from there went to Camp Lejeune, into the Fleet Marines, and was supposed to be there for 2 years. I was there for probably 2 months. And from there I went basically all around the world to Okinawa, the Philippines, and then the Gulf War broke out. I wound up in Oman, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and then back home. What was supposed to be a 6-month deployment wound up being 9 months. I was just sharing a story earlier that we were in the desert. It was sort of funny, my grandfather, Jack McDonald, for any of you that might remember him, sent me a letter once with $3 in it to go buy a beer. And I stood on top of this dune in the middle of the desert with no signs of civilization whatsoever, so I just threw the money into the air because there was no way to buy a beer. But I went, the story I was telling earlier was when I would write letters home, the paper started white, and by the time I got done, it was brown. I went 64 days without a shower, took a shower, got a haircut, and then went 58 days without a shower. And my father had written back to me once saying, "You must stink because I can smell you on these letters." So, you know, we probably smelled like a bunch of goats out in the middle of the desert, and we were literally out in the middle of the desert. Like I said, no signs of civilization at all. Not much water, obviously no food, no hot meals. Everything we had were the dehydrated MREs, meals ready to eat, which quite the diet plan. Everything they feed you binds you up. No restrooms, obviously, if there weren't showers. So it was interesting. Our job, I was in the infantry, our job was to clear a breach in the minefields that the Iraqis had set up. So we did that, and we cleared the breach for the Army's Tiger Brigade to come through, which was the then brand new A1 Abram tanks. For any of you that have seen the skull and crossbone flag at the football games, I actually started that tradition my senior year. While I was there, somebody sent me a Kentucky pennant and a skull and crossbone pennant, and we had those on the antennas of our vehicle, of our Amtrak. And the smoke was so thick that was the only way our commander could tell where we stopped and the Army began was through those flags. So it's sort of an interesting thing to have those on there. I got yelled at for putting them on the antennas at first, and then afterwards they thought it was a good idea because they could see us. So this is before there was a lot of technology for NVGs and things like that. So we cleared the minefields. We sort of interesting. We blew up an Amtrak in the middle of the minefield, so we had to get out and run through them, which is an interesting experience when you're running through minefields and you don't know where stuff is, and it's the desert and everything looks kind of the same. And you know, there's no real way to orientate yourself because everything looks the same in every direction. But we completed our objectives very quickly, to the point where we were literally running from place to place to place. And they had to stop us so the rest of the battalion could catch up and the Army could catch up. Bert. Typical Army, always behind. Couldn't run. So anyways, the second night of the objective, after you probably saw the images on TV, Saddam had blown up the oil wells. And as you looked on the horizon out 20 miles, however far it was about that high. The smoke came up and then it went across the entire horizon and then came over us. And it was so dark that night that I literally put my hand in front of my face and couldn't see it. And again, we didn't have any NVGs, night vision goggles, thermals, any of those things. So if you were trying to go from fighting hole to fighting hole in the dark, you were doing it on your hands and knees and hoping that nobody shot you thinking you were a bad guy. So that was a pretty interesting night, to say the least. And again, we just kept moving further and further forward till we wound up outside an old Kuwaiti base that the Iraqis had taken over that we subsequently blew the hell out of. Went in there, cleared it, and that was our home for the next 30 days or so. We were at the very tail end of the highway of death, as they call it, as all the Iraqis tried to retreat. We watched the A6 and the A10 jets blow them up. We were just sitting there waiting for just one to get through, and none of them got through. That was kind of it in a nutshell. So,
Joe, you're up.
Bear with me, I'm not big on circles. It reminds me a lot like Germany going through reintegration back into civilian life. Joe LaBlanc, wasn't born here but raised here. Parents were Armin and Mary LaBlanc. Graduated here in 2001, left for the Air Force October 15, 2002. Got out of the Air Force August 15, 2011. 7 years North Carolina, 2 years Arizona, with a few tours in between. A lot of the stuff I did over there, I'm not allowed to talk about yet because I haven't been out 10 years yet. Till 2021, I'll be able to talk about what I did. But I was up in northeast Afghanistan, up in the Hindu Kush Mountains. Ran a lot of PRT, which is Provincial Reconstruction Team. Built hospitals, schools, hydro dams. We were part of an ISAF unit, International Assistance Security Force, which was countries, it had been 20 different countries. As you can tell, not many people my age are here. A lot of them aren't ready to talk yet.
Yeah.
And like I said, a lot of us still things that we have to get through. And as Gunny says, there were times that he couldn't talk about what he went through, and through time he's been able to. So with the same time, I'll be able to do the same. That's all I got.
The thing is that with these young men, the thing is with these young people coming back, I call them young people because I'm older.
Everybody's younger than you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the same age as dirt. So these young people coming back, both men and women, we have to realize that this is the first war that we went into, or conflict, that we actually have a lot of women over there. My daughter was in the Marine Corps, Tammy, and she graduated the first combat women's group out of Paris Island. She's no longer with us, but they started to use women more and more, a lot of security, stuff like that there, but they were there, the women are there. And it's funny because it's not really funny, but it's a coincidence that in Israel, it's mandatory that you serve 2 years, whether you're a boy or a girl, female or male. You have to serve at least 2 years in the military.
Right out of high school, guys, right?
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
as soon as they graduate. Now, and then after they do their 2 years, they can hit all the college and everything else, just like we do here, get paid for and stuff. But I made the big mistake a couple of summers ago. I was at a picnic out in a friend's backyard, and she introduced me to this young lady who was from Israel, and she was a combat soldier. And I made a sly remark, which was stupid of me, and the next thing I knew, I was laying on my back. So I was embarrassed, she was embarrassed, we were all embarrassed. But then we all grabbed our hot dogs and just started eating, we were all right with it. How many have been in the military here, that are here today?
Raise your hand. Put your hand up.
That's good. Yeah, don't be ashamed of it over there, go ahead and put your hand up. I've known him for quite a while. I'm glad to see the turnout here. But like Joe was saying, these young people today, Patrick was good enough to get a hold of like 6 or 7 different ones. And I talked to a few also. But in the back of our mind, we just knew that a lot of them weren't gonna show. They're not ready to talk about it. They've gone through a lot of hard stuff, and they've gone through stuff that they can't talk to you about, just like Joe said. And Patrick was good enough to come forward with it. Patrick's my #1 ace guy. I just call him and Joe both. When I need to have something military, I just call those two, and it gets done. So I really want to thank you two for showing up. It was great.
No problem, Gunny.
I know it's hard for you.
So, to jump on one of Gunny's stories, so Bert and I were part of an organization called Nantucket Holidays for Heroes. We brought countless veterans and their families to the island, and one of the women that came here, Doc Sonic, was a female corpsman, and she did, I don't know if I can remember now, I think 11 combat tours. Because she was a female, she couldn't be officially assigned to an infantry unit, so she was in and out. She was stationed in Cuba, but she'd go back and forth, back and forth. Taliban attacked a school. They went in the next day to try and repair and do damage. Taliban came back. She got riddled with machine gun bullets, wound up losing her arm. So the whole catastrophe of communication, they told her husband that she was dead, and then 2 weeks, and then never called back, and then 2 weeks later, oh no, she's alive. However, the interesting thing, because she was a woman and couldn't be assigned to an infantry unit, she didn't qualify for a Purple Heart, she didn't qualify for all things. The Navy actually had the audacity to put in her record book that she lost her arm in a softball accident, Which I said, talk about throwing the arm out, Doc. So it took many times for her to finally get the right documentation. She had a Purple Heart, she lost it, she got it, she lost it, so now she has it back. She has a stack of ribbons, you know, probably that rival Gunny's, and it's interesting because she'll go to the VFW and people say, oh, the women's auxiliary's in the back. She's like, no, I have, you know, 11 or 13 combat tours. I'm staying up front. So it is interesting in the United States now that women are slowly being integrated, but you don't hear a whole lot. But you do see, if you follow any of the military pages on Facebook, you'll see there's always women that have died, you know, in the last 13, 14 years that this war has been going on, whether they were pilots or they were drivers or they were, you know, medics or whatever. So it's interesting.
That has a lot to do with the Muslim religion as well.
Right.
A man and a Muslim woman will never be in the same room together.
Right.
So that's why you do need females. We had a couple of female doctors up there with us, and they were the only ones that could care to the females and the kids. And a lot of those kids were coming in blown up from the mines and stuff like that. Now, these females, they'd wear the hijabs and all that, and that's how they were seen and catered to. If we didn't have the females with us, we wouldn't be able to get through half the stuff that we did. Because a lot of times the female would feel better if you're talking to another female and tell us, hey, there's an IED about 100 yards up the road. I just want to tell you that because you've come in here and you've helped us. A man and a female Muslim will never make that contact, but sometimes there'll be convoys that go through, and a female will be off to the side and they'll make contact with you. And if they make contact with you, you stop the convoy there and you radio back, because there's an IUD up ahead, or there's an ambush that's about to happen. So I mean, the females are a big pivot to the war up there. I mean, they're tremendous. I don't know how they did it before without them. I really don't.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Feel free to just jump up anytime.
Yes.
First
Or
off,
just
I
put-
want to thank you both for being here today and how difficult it must be. So could you tell us the time, the dates that you served, like the years?
I was in from June of '87 to June of '91. Well, I signed up in, I guess it was a year delayed entry, so June of '86 when I forced her to sign the paperwork reluctantly.
I went in October 2nd, 2002, and got out April 15th, 2011. The Air Force recruited at Smart. They sent down this little girl. She was beautiful. She came down to where the high school was having their career day. I was a senior. No, I was a junior. My brother was a senior. Anyway, she ended up signing 5 of us that day. She got to the point where she was so good at her job, they ended up sending her down to Florida to recruit doctors. So she signed 5 of us.
I did bring some photos if you want. I can hand them out and you can pass them around if you'd like. There's various ones. You'll see what somebody looked like 20 some odd years ago.
But one thing that they touched on is
You were
it's
just
tough to
a
get
baby.
these guys together to talk to one another. Like, this week I got the phone number of my RTO.
Kids.
I've talked to him once on the phone. He lost his wife this past year. I could never get him to come to a reunion. And he was, as you know, guy, he was with me all the time. The radio had to be right behind him.
Yeah.
And even still, 55 years later, he still can't deal with it.
Yeah.
That's the one beauty of the modern technology is Facebook. I've been able to get in touch with a bunch of guys that I was in the Marines with that I probably never would have one way or another. I mean, there was one guy that was my best friend and we kind of in and out of contact, but it seems, you know, if it wasn't for Facebook, we'd probably never hear from each other.
Yeah. Cool.
As Patrick's mom, I'm surprised. I've heard some things today that I never really heard from him before because he really didn't share it with him. But it was, it's gonna, the worst time in our life because there was on television and every vehicle that came with that skulls, crossbones, flag, I'm thinking, is that him? Is that him? But really, and when we heard about it, we were just finishing a basketball game. We were at, which is Atlantic Cafe, and we heard that the war had started. Well, there were 5 or 6 of us, and we all jumped up, And thank you to the Atlantic Cafe, they didn't charge us for our meal, but because we were so upset that we had finally gone to war, you know, not that I wanted to go to war, but, it just was a very difficult time that, because I felt we couldn't get away from the TV, because there were pictures, and I'm sorry about Vietnam, I had a brother in Vietnam, but, I think I was too busy having babies when that was happening.
Like this one.
Yeah.
Except that one.
Well, the thing about the TV and stuff, as far as Vietnam went, it was just the first time that it ever happened. We had cameras, I'll tell you a little story about, we were out on a search and destroy in the middle of the night. And we'd gone out of our CP command post, and we were heading out in the dark. And we were gonna set up an ambush, because we knew that the people were coming through and we were gonna ambush them. And what had happened, when it started, we started firing, there was this bright light that just went poof. I mean, it lit up the whole area. And I was the squad leader, the guy in charge, and I'm saying to myself, holy Christ, they got a new weapon we don't know anything about. And it just kept lighting up and lighting up. And I'm like, what the heck? Because you didn't hear any explosion afterwards. Finally, I turned around, and here's a reporter there with a camera,
That's his
with a
flash.
flashlight going boom, boom, and of course, the NVA and stuff was zoning right in on the flash. So we were I lost 3 guys that night.
Oh,
But,
It
Yeah.
it was interesting, just after I got out, my unit actually went back to the invasion in Somalia. And I remember watching it on TV that the cameramen were on the beach already, filming the Marines as they came ashore. I'm like, this is just,
That's crazy.
it made no sense.
I know.
Well, one thing with us in Vietnam, we were out in the jungle all the time. It was dangerous. None of the TV reporters came unless a battle was over.
Right.
And the general came out to see what went on, and they take pictures of dead bodies, but during battles, you never saw any movement. It was too dangerous, they didn't want to be there.
We only saw them, the only time they showed up once, so when we blew up the minefields, we actually blew up a blister agent mine. So a gentleman on the Amtrak I was on got on his hand, a buddy of mine got on his face, so of course President Bush had said if they use chemicals, we'll use nukes. So out come the news reporters,
Right.
and these guys have big rings from the blister agent, because what it does, when it gets on you, it's a glob, and you use a decon kit 1 minute with one pack and 2 minutes with the next pack, and it dries up, winds up looking like ringworm. So both of them had these big rings. Well, here come the news reporters, where the recon, we had a warrant officer that was a recon guy, and so he's the NBC officer, nuclear, biological, and chemical, and he comes with these TV reporters, and he looks at it and goes, oh, that's just ringworm. Like, meanwhile, there's blister agent over all our gear, and I'm like, no, it wasn't a blister agent, it was just ringworm, like, you're just dirty.
You didn't want the word to get out.
No, they weren't, they squashed that. It was the only time we saw news reporters.
Patrick also went with 2 of his classmates, which he could probably fill you in on where
they're
they are now.
That's- One was an intelligence, if there's such a thing as military intelligence, especially in the Marine Corps, and the other one was,
Oxymoron.
the other one was an MP. It was funny, when I wound up in Okinawa, you have to go through, basically through customs, and so here come the MPs to search us, and it's my buddy Roger Mavis from high school. I'm like, well, you're not going through my crap. We're all set. And then Craig Saunders, who was Lieutenant Day's stepson, was there as well. He was the one that was in intelligence. That was, I think, the only time I saw him, was that the first day, so we shipped out, right back out shortly after that. My unit had a propensity for fighting. Everywhere we went, we got into brawls, didn't matter who it was with, so. We were in Okinawa, we got in a big brawl with 4th Recon, just 3 or 4 softball fields together. And the last thing I saw was a gentleman running with a section of pipe stage like that, and hit the guy across the back. I'm like, oh, here we go. So, our battalion commander always volunteered us to go places.
I ran into one Nantucket guy. I was coming off the USS Sanctuary with my 2nd Purple Heart, and they landed me in Fubai. And I was getting off and going across a flight deck, and I heard this, hey, Richards, and I'm looking around, who the hell knows me over here? Probably somebody I don't want to know. I look, and it's Biffy Campbell. He was in the Army, unfortunately, but him and I tied one on that day, and I don't remember leaving Fubai, but I must have.
Patty, do you know what ward Tony Marks was in and Jimmy Coffin? We have memorials for them on.
Right, we do. At the, I believe that the coffin was in the Korean War.
Yes.
Yes, he was.
So he was, so I did a thing last year that was on WACK. James Coffin was actually blown up on a bridge in Korea and his body was never discovered. So now that these relations, our relations with North Korea are better, the family, Stacy Davis in particular, who was, God, what's her
Damien.
name? Huh?
Stacy Damien.
Yes, but I'm trying to think of her mother's name. Shirley?
Sally.
Sally Davis Coffin. Was hoping, she's donated her DNA, hoping they can make a connection to get any remains that might be from when he died back. So which would be nice to have happen.
That's,
Yeah.
And how about Tony Marks?
I think Tony was actually in Vietnam.
Vietnam.
Vietnam?
Yeah.
Very, Tony Marks is very early Vietnam, and he
Right.
was a
Oh,
surveyor.
Surveyor. He was in an ambush. From the research I did, he was in an ambush. A fellow, I want to say he was in the Air Force. A fellow airman was injured. He went up to go get him, and he was shot there. But yeah, he was one of the few that we had casualties we had from Vietnam.
Anybody else?
I gotta tell you a cute story about my nephew Warren Meehan. He joined the Navy right after being married and etc. And they had training going on, and the officer said, "Does anybody here want to call home?" Warren raises his hand. Well, he says, "Okay, after you clean all the latrines, you can call home." So he called Mom, and Mom says, "You sound tired." He says, "I am." I'll never forget that story.
That's funny.
I thought it was going to be what we had at boot camp, which is anybody want to call home, and if you raised your hand, they took you to the window, they opened the window, and they told you to call home.
Volunteer for anything.
Yelling out the window, "Hi, Mom!"
So it must have been hard to be in combat with all that heavy gear on in the desert.
It was interesting, and the day that we arrived in Oman, and then we went from Oman up to Saudi Arabia. It was 4:30 or so in the evening. It was 104 degrees, and at first it was a mistake I had, and I actually still have combat boots that come up to here. The Fort Lewis editions, what they're called. They're insulated, they're waterproof, and they're extremely heavy. And everybody else wound up with, well, we had jungle boots at the time, which are, I think, are horrible, and then we wound up with desert boots, which are similar. But thankfully, I stuck with those boots the entire time, because eventually, once Saddam blew up all those wells, all those particles and stuff went in the air, and it wound up raining on us for several days in a row, and I was the only one with dry feet, warm dry feet, because I had these big boots that I was running around in. But it was interesting. It literally rained oil on us. I read in a book, some woman from Nantucket had done, and if you were in Saudi Arabia at the time, it was the equivalent of smoking 30 cigarettes a day, and if you were in Kuwait at the time, it was the equivalent of smoking 30 packs of cigarettes a day.
Wow.
So that's the damage it did to our lungs. When I came home, I had spots all over my chest, so it just was some pretty nasty stuff.
So you have to stay up on your medical work.
Well, I probably should, but.
Well, I was out of high school and decided I didn't want to go to college. And this is in New Jersey. And I came down with a buddy to see what these guys were doing. And anyway, we went in for the place and signed in, and the guy who looked like a cowboy came over and said, "Well, you're in the Army." I said, "Oh, my God." And I said, "Look, I don't have money, but I had better tell my mother I fought here, so I did. And she said, oh, you're in the army, that's nice. So, that day, they sent me down with a cab, there wasn't a cab, it was like a bus, to the store, because they had a and then, 2 days later, we went up to,
Oh,
and,
Ginny.
did combat.
Could you open
They
that?
were
Open
really
it?
fussy with that. And
Just a
then
little.
the next thing, we were on a
Okay,
boat,
yeah, yeah.
and 7 days later, we were in North Africa. And I knew that the war was on because the Germans would take their planes down over the gun and boats, and you had to scramble to get away from that. And and then I was sent to another unit. This is North Africa, and I mentioned to a guy that I had a motorcycle that I had to sell it. Big. I had to get a motorcycle messenger. They had a little black bag. And with another guy, telephones weren't working so well, I guess.
Right.
And for a while, and finally we got.
You delivered all the messages.
But,
You were delivering messages.
yeah, and then I was shipped to a boat called the
Alexander.
Oh, yeah, Alexander Graham Bell. That was the name of this boat. And I got on, and there was some Navy guys on. And of course, I had gone through the real war because at night the Germans would bring the planes in. And fortunately, these boats have big spotlights, and they blind the pilots. And 3 of those guys I could see in the distance hit the ground. Anyway, we were on this boat, and we wound up in Italy, and same as a motorcycle messenger. And then I was put in a motor pool, and they'd send you out, and it was a little scary because you didn't know if there's a bomb there or treasure and stuff. And I wound up in another place, and well, I could go on and on.
There until the end of the war.
Yes. That was nice.
Yes, thank you. The big thing to remember is no matter who you are, when you go off to war, you're gonna change. I don't care who you are. It's gonna change you. You're gonna look at life a lot differently. When I went to my first tour in Vietnam, I couldn't wait to get back to Nantucket and have a chocolate frap. That was the most important thing in the world to me. Didn't matter about my parents or my sisters or brothers or anything else, I just wanted a chocolate frap. So it does change you. I'm gonna throw out this word that everybody knows today, but it actually started with the military. It's called PTSD. I have it. I've had it for 40-something years. Little story, I had gone home from my first tour and was standing in the dining room with my arms up like this here on the door. And my sister Rhonda, who some of you know, she was in school at the time, she came up behind me and put her arms around me. Well, before I even thought about it, I threw her across the room, down right. And my father was sitting for about me to that young lady right there with the red sweater on, because we have a very large family. So we have a big table. And she just kind of slid all the way down that table right into my father. And both of them, their eyes were about this big. And I was so embarrassed, I just had to kind of sneak out of the room and go upstairs. I told my mother, my stepmother, when you come to wake me up, don't come in my room. Just, I'll leave my boots outside. You throw my boots in there and that'll wake me up. I'll be up. And when she'd do it, I'd be standing in the middle of my bed. It changes you. It really, it does a job on you. I don't care what you were. I don't care if you were in the rear with a gear or you were out there fighting with a weapon.
Just small stuff, like when I brought my truck up to go into the parking lot, I felt like I was squeezed in. I parked down there by Sales.
Oh, yeah.
I saw you walk out.
And just with her closing the door there,
Closing the door,
I
yeah.
just,
Yeah.
just being enclosed. Just as simple as going to Stop and Shop, getting flustered easily.
Mhm.
Just because people are just standing around, they have no mission, they don't know what they're doing. It's like, get in, get out.
I almost wrecked some little girl and stopped showing my hands when I first got home that came up behind me.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we as civilians can do to help you or any returning soldier, service?
I mean, stuff like this, just knowing that people are there, they're willing to listen. I mean, because a lot of us, we end up in the bar room.
Yeah.
We end up basically getting drunk every day. You know, I mean, Nantucket's a hard place.
Mhm.
I mean, it is a hard place.
Yeah, there's not a whole bunch to do here.
I mean, the one thing in the military, it's like you're always, I mean, from a big family, I'm from a big family, so you always had somebody with you.
Yeah.
Military as well, you always had somebody with you. Military, all you want is 5 minutes alone. Just get the hell away from it. Now that you get out, you don't have that anymore. And now you find yourself by yourself all the time, lonesome. 'Cause it's just not there.
I had
Military.
a member of the
I
family
had something there
that
to
just spent
add.
4.5 years on an aircraft carrier in the Pacific during World War II.
We're gonna talk about
He was a type of boy that never drank, never smoked, and when he came home, I was probably 12, 13 years old, and I watched him at his home, and he sat there constantly, and he took up drinking beer, but he would always do it at home. But it does change you,
Yeah.
and what was going through his mind, I always wonder.
Well, the worst thing is like the cigarettes. They send you in the sundry packages to the field, cartons of cigarettes
Yeah.
to encourage
Right.
people to smoke. No,
Yeah.
dumbest thing.
Yeah, that was back then. I mean,
Yeah.
going in 2002, I was going out, just finished basic in Texas. Now, my AIT, my tech school was out in California. That was probably the end of December 2002. And as we were getting up to post, it was the last day the Air Force and the Navy was allowing recruits to smoke on post. And they cut smoking real quick.
Yeah,
But then again, the whole war with Afghanistan was starting to roll with Iraq as well. So they were introducing the physical fitness program. So can't be fit if you're smoking. Can't be in 130-degree weather with 50 pounds of gear on top of you and expect not to hold your own.
Right?
Yeah, is there a support group for the vets here on the island?
Not really. I mean, the VFW, but that's.
I mean, there are a few people that have my number that I've been called at 12:30 in the evening to go get a buddy at the bar because he's hammered.
There's a lot
Where
of,
I come from, there was one for the men, the soldiers, and then one for the wives.
there's
To
a
understand what was
little bit of a
going on.
network. There was a young Marine who was on island. He's actually since moved off island. And I got a call from a mutual friend saying, hey, I need you to come with me. And so went up at his house, and he'd been on a 3 or 4 day bender with booze and drugs and everything else, and the shades all closed. And he'd done 2 combat tours in Afghanistan. The second one, he lost quite a few buddies, and it was kind of a, I'll say, sobering for lack of a better word. I had his brother and a mutual friend leave, and he and I just sat there. And the biggest message that I tried to get to him, because he was having survivor's remorse among many other things, is to say, if your buddies that died saw you living this way, pardon me, but they'd kick your ass and to knock it off. And thankfully, you know, he's had some ups and downs, but he wound up being a supporter with Holidays for Heroes. From what I can see now, because he's off island, from what I can see, he's doing well off island. He's a hell of a woodworker. But it's really, I think it's just, I mean, I've known Joe for, well, since he was this big, because his brother and sister actually lived with me for a while, and I wouldn't have known him if I tripped over him, because it's been so long. So now, thankfully, now we have a connection, and I guarantee I'll be getting his phone number here in a bit. So we'll have a connection. You know, I've had Gunny's number for I don't know how long. So thankfully, you know, we have a little bit of a network amongst warriors, is probably the best way to put it. And hopefully, you know, there's a saying in AA, thankfully I've been sober for just over 25 years now. There's a saying in AA, the heaviest thing in the world is a phone. And I think that goes for veterans as well. We don't want to pick up a phone and call for help. It's just not who we are. So it's tough to do.
And they say 22 vets a day end up killing themselves a day. I mean, a lot of that's got to do with the VA as well. You go up there and you need help, and they say they can't see you for 6 months. You know you're going to end up swallowing the bullet between them and them.
Aren't they working to change that? I thought, now
Just
you
so
were
many
telling
of
us
us.
that, they're not.
And then everyone playing the PTSD card. I mean, you got people that have been stateside, and they're running drones and claiming PTSD.
Yeah,
Like, you
it's-
weren't even boots on ground. You didn't see what you were going for. It was on a camera, and you hit a little button.
Well, for you guys, there is a girl that comes over here now, well, not a girl, but a woman, Jocelyn something, or other. She comes over once a month, and she sees people, she's from the Cape Cod VA Center, which is separate from the VA. And they don't share any information with the VA. But when she comes over here, she meets people upstairs in the Chamber of Commerce building. There's that big conference room, they give her the conference room, and she schedules people to come in and see her. And then there's another guy that comes over with her too, to help you with paperwork and stuff like that.
Well, I can understand that's probably going to be further down the line, but right now a lot of us are still in the bar. Because it's the only way we can talk.
Yeah. And my advice to you, being a Vietnam veteran, I go to all my reunions and I call all my guys to try to gather them all up to go. Because we sit around and have a couple of beers and relive everything that we
See,
did.
the time
It's
you
much
went,
easier
the
to
time
do
you
it
went
at
to the
night.
military and the time I've gone through, there was an enemy. They were in uniform. You knew who you were fighting. Us, we had no idea. I could have trained you a week ago and you're in the same uniform, then you pull a rifle on me and you kill about 3 of my buddies before I get a shot out. I mean, the Afghan nationals, they were quick to turn. I mean,
They still are.
I just heard this
And
last
they
week.
still are.
There's one the other night. when I did it.
I mean, it's a never-ending war, and it will be, until they learn to stand up for themselves. They want the handouts, just like Americans as well. They'd rather sit on their ass and collect a check every week. And now we're starting to teach them the same habits.
Well, it happened to us in Vietnam, we tried to train them, and as soon as we went there, they fell apart.
It's sad.
Sometimes you have to ask yourself, and I'm all pro-American, believe me, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Why are we sending our young men and women over to, say, Afghanistan? Those people, and nothing against those people, but when I say those people, I don't mean to label anybody, because there are good people over there too. But those people over there have been fighting each other for thousands of years over water holes, camels, and sand dunes. And they hate us. We think we're gonna be big brother and we're gonna go over there and save the world.
Well,
Same thing with Vietnam, it was the same thing, it was a rubber industry. There's always something there. With Afghanistan and the Middle East, it's oil.
oil underneath
Opium,
that.
opium.
Mhm. Yeah, it's too bad. I mean, we got a great nation here, and it's well worth fighting for. But sometimes I just wonder if we should pull everybody back.
Yeah, but you guys had a cause. What was our cause?
that's it. That's what I'm
Right.
We
saying.
had no
There was
cause,
no
we
cause.
were told to go and we did. Now we look back at it, it's what they die for,
Right, exactly.
nothing.
Well, it's a different fear. There was a fear of the spread of communism, fear of the spread of Islam. It's, you know, it's all fear-based, unfortunately. It's, you know, we've been putting our fingers in everybody else's pie for a long time.
Yes, I mean, the first time the World Trade Center was attacked was back in '95 under the Clinton administration. He didn't do anything. I mean, Bin Laden personally told him, I will own those towers one day. Everyone looked the other way.
And we trained those pilots here,
Yes.
in Florida.
It's crazy, because you see over there in Kuwait, all you see is Bin Laden construction, Bin Laden this, Bin Laden that.
Big family.
Huge family.
Yeah.
And we took care of them.
Yes.
Mary,
Jerry, you mentioned something about you couldn't talk for 10 years. Is that all military?
Well, I have a secret clearance, so I was up there. I mean, my unit, while I was always deployed, wasn't no more than maybe 20, 30 guys tops. So I was in a lot of places. I mean, I was running in towns where they've never seen Americans before, but you can clearly tell they're Russians have been there with the blonde hair and blue eyes. I mean, they were all over the place. But I mean, a lot of those places and a lot of stuff that I did, there's a 10-year waiting period before it becomes public to everyone else. I mean, they gotta go through and black out everything. And then after that, I can talk.
Do you have to take an oath or anything to
absolutely.
that? You do?
Absolutely. And that's allowed with integrity as well.
there's a lot of that, not a lot of it, but it's like some of the non-combat situations that you might just find yourself in Washington DC. If you guard the tomb of the unknown soldier, you have to sign a contract, not to swear, not to drink in public. There's a lot of stuff, and if you get caught, it's sayonara.
I think that's an oath for life too, the tomb of the unknown soldier.
It
No
is.
drinking, no smoking, no
Yeah.
swearing for life. So I'm out. I don't drink or smoke, so guess which one got me kicked out?
So the women in combat, how do they fix the housing when you're in the desert? I mean, do they have a separate
Well,
area?
The only time we saw them, when we first got there, we guarded a port for everything to come off, and they had their own, we're basically it was like hangars or storage space, and a couple of women, let's just say, had a good business sense to make some extra money on the side, and that was the only time that we were anywhere near them, that they had their own little brothel, so to speak. But other than that, once we got out of the rear, once we got in the middle of the desert, I never did see a female for
No, I'm talking
months
about
and
women
months.
soldiers.
No, none,
Nobody.
not when I was not in
Yeah.
the, early 90s.
Most of them, they put like his MPs and things like that.
Right.
So
And
they
a real
went
with the
on
game.
that.
They knew better than keep them away from crane-eating Marines.
Marines that haven't bathed in 3 months.
Right, eating crayons and dropping on the wall.
The daughter of one of my high school buddies was a helicopter major 15 years ago over there. You know, I kept thinking, that may have been 20 years ago. I can't remember. It's been so long. It's just never ending.
Yeah.
But I was read letters from her, and it sounded like a regular Army major writing a letter. It didn't sound like an Army female major. It just sounded like a major writing about what the hell was going on over there.
They work very hard to make sure that that's how people understand it. They don't want to be separated out.
And I'd met her before she went, and I don't think she took any crap from anybody. But I do have
Most
a
women
question.
know.
I do have a question though. A number of us on the island have been trying to help people. And it turns out, we don't know what to say to them. They don't know what to say to us. And there's just nothing going on. And I don't know any way to help you, and you probably don't know any way to tell me what kind of help you could need. Is there some way to get around that?
Basically, trial by error. I mean, basically, you do what you can. If you see another buddy struggling, you've already gone through that process, you give them the shortcut instead of having them fall on the face. I mean, it's basically, you gotta find it for yourself. When they say you make it or you don't. I mean,
And I think we could do that without worrying about people being in the service. We could do that on our daily lives. If we see something, and I try to do it in the store or wherever I don't know them, I give them a smile and I say hello, thinking that maybe they'll figure that somebody is, is recognizing them.
Somebody cares.
And not just the people in the service, but
Right.
everybody. That's what we could do. We're a very small community and we can do it really very well. We wanted
That's
to
an
do
old
it.
thing too, it's a small community. I mean, if I had my truck outside of, say, a psychiatrist's office, I'll have a phone call by the end of the night, hey, I saw
That
you,
is an issue.
I saw your truck outside of a
Yeah.
psychiatrist, you all right?
And that stigma's gotta go.
That's true.
Right.
Really.
Yeah.
We all can go and need help from,
But the flip side, it's not the same community that, certainly that I grew up in, and you as well, that when you're walking through Stop and Shop, that you actually knew the person that's coming the other way to say hi to, and
well,
just people
I say
aren't.
to anybody that I don't know.
Right.
You have to keep going.
That's what the little blurb is for. That's what I wrote that blurb for.
I like to talk.
When you're running around town and stuff, you don't know who's going by you. You don't know what their life is. You don't know what they're going through.
Yeah, and and
Just
I
a little
appreciate
friendly,
Joel.
hello, how are you doing? How's things going? You know? How are you today?
Yeah.
I learned something from the former dean of the Boston University School of Theology. If you were taking a course there, and you walked down the hall, you had to speak to every single person. You might pass 50 people before you could get to the next class. And you had to say good morning or good afternoon. You had to speak to every single person you saw, whether you'd ever seen them before or not. And by the end of the school year, you sort of felt you knew everybody a little bit. All right, so I used it more frequently with the pretty girls.
Weird how that works, huh?
But that's the way Nantucket used to be.
There are
Everybody
some
would say
little
hi to
tricks like that, and I don't know any others. It's the only one I've ever run into that works. But just saying good morning. If you do that on a regular basis for 200 or 300 or 400 days, and you can build up at least a modest amount of communication amongst you. But it's not enough. I wish I knew more.
Well, a lot of it's the political card as well. I mean, a lot of people get out, and when they do get out, they stay around the base at least, because they want to stay within their people. I mean, here we are, a Democratic stronghold, who have been 100% against the war from day one, and then you tell them that you're a vet, they kind of look the other way. It's like, whatever.
It's still that way?
Oh, absolutely.
I
Just
know
like the
after
guys coming back
Vietnam,
from
it really
Vietnam.
was.
The same thing. I mean, not as bad as being called baby killers and being spat on, but, I mean,
It's interesting, and I thought about this earlier, so this war in Afghanistan and Iraq has been going on for 15, 16 years now. When's the last time you saw anything about it on TV? Anymore? It's become forgotten, other than, unfortunately over the weekend, 2 gentlemen, were killed, and that was an insider attack, so to speak. It was a green on green where Afghan soldiers turned on American soldiers that were, but you don't hear about it anymore. And even when somebody dies, you don't hear about it anymore, unfortunately. In society today, basketball player, and dies in a helicopter crash, and the whole world knows about it, but 2 Green Berets
the world
die.
stops.
2 Green Berets die fighting for us, and it barely makes, it makes it onto the TV. So, it's just society today.
It's like it's heartbreaking to look back on all the wars, and all the people that died, and now today, like Vietnam is a big vacation spot. People going there for vacation. I don't know if I could go there on vacation.
I got
Just to know
some
people who were
furniture
there.
delivered the other day, and I'm looking at the box, and it said made in Vietnam.
Love
And I said to my son, I said, gee, that could have been made out of a tree I hid behind.
But it's so real. War is just
Right.
crazy.
It
And
is. It never makes sense. That's the.
No, war doesn't make sense.
Well, it does when you're there.
Right.
Because it's
Yeah.
not
To
about,
have
it's
something
not
to
about
fight
the mission.
for,
Right.
You know, it's different, I think.
Right.
It's like World War I and II, especially World War II, I think that they had something to fight for.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
But, you know, then came Vietnam and it was just, you know, it was the beginning of
Yeah.
the change.
Just how wars evolved. I mean, you go from the Revolutionary War where they stood in formation and waited for the other guys to load their rifles. While they stood there,
I know.
knowing very well they were about to get shot.
Get over that.
But yet they stood their ground.
Yeah.
And the
Here.
Civil War, it was brother against brother.
Yeah, brother against brother, uncle against nephew.
That was
And now everything's all automated.
electronic. They have the drones now. I saw a movie with the drones, they're like a bug, and it's like a little gnat or something that's up on the wall, and you're watching it. And they use them for warfare.
Yeah, I mean, just like the assassination of Somalia there, I don't think he should have gone taken out like that. I mean, war's a gentleman's game, and he'd been in it a long time. He should have been taken out by some force recon guy or something else, not some machine that's piled halfway around the world.
Gunning would have gone, right? Gunning was for.
Any of us would have taken that set of orders. But, I mean,
The technology has certainly changed.
Well, even just telephone, I mean, cell phones today. Are you allowed to have cell phones?
They weren't around.
Right, yeah.
It was interesting, I was telling somebody a story. We had one GPS unit for the entire battalion, and it was the size of the radios we had, and there were these big coffee grinding knobs, and it could only get you from point A to point B. It couldn't tell you where you were. So if you looked on a grid map and you wanted to go to whatever coordinates, you dialed those in, and it led you there. Now, we have GPS in our phone that is more accurate than anything we ever could. It's just amazing, the technology. Like I said, the night vision goggles, now they wear them, you see them in the movies, they can flip a switch and it's all green to night vision to heat sensing, thermals, and we couldn't see anything. I did.
y'all use boomerang fire out there?
No, I did, my job, I did a lot of navigating at night, and thankfully I knew the stars fairly well from growing up on Nantucket, and I did all my navigating via the stars, and it was literally a compass and go that way. And taking what we call a pace count, so you know how far you're going. But no, nothing fancy back then. It was, here you are, go there, and that was it.
See, with us up in the Hindu Kush Mountains, I mean, we were 10,000 feet above way up there. I mean, he's talking about night vision goggles and stuff. We couldn't use stuff like that. So if we were going into a spot and we knew there was going to be action, we'd have the 155 housers throw up balloon rounds. And the balloon rounds, basically, it's like the sun. It's like noon outside. I can see you clear as day as you can see me, and it could be at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, wow.
And then it's phosphorus and it glows real bright.
It glows real bright. And that's what we used instead of night vision goggles. And the only time we really used night vision is if we were driving, and if we were going south. But if we were going north, we were climbing higher up into the mountains, and it was just different.
Problem we have with illumination rounds, you had to close your shooting eye, you closed your right eye.
Oh, yeah.
So you don't, because you would lose your night vision effectiveness if you kept it open. You'd go, all of a sudden it gets dark, and it's like anybody else. You walk into a dark room, you can't see. Well, imagine that now your shooting eye, you can't see. So you'd learn to close your shooting eye while there's illumination round in the sky, or just keep your head down.
So even stuff like that, he's talking about closing his eye for shooting. We use CCOs, close combat ops, on top of our rifles, and we were taught to keep our eyes open as we shot. So we didn't have one eye closed to see we couldn't see what's going on over here, what the close out, and it's just how technology changes.
Right.
We were iron sights.
See, he's running iron sights, we're running red dot. I mean, the red dot during the night and green dot during the day.
Yeah, different. So, but I think one thing, however, I saw 3 or 4 veterans out there and the 3 of us here, I would be willing to bet in any veteran you find, none of us would change it. We'd probably all do it again. I know, I'd sign up again if I could. And there are a few choices I made in my time in the Marine Corps that I might change, but I would certainly do it all over again. All the experiences and everything else, I would change it.
Yeah.
Well, I'd stay,
It's worth every scar.
I'd still begin. I go back to August 15th, I kick myself and be like, don't even think about signing that paperwork. Go pack your bag and get on that plane.
Yeah, I wished I had stayed in also.
They had to throw you out of the field.
I had to
But
try
it
to-
doesn't always work. I was working with an E8 at the Pentagon in '68, and he just had to go to Vietnam because he knew he could never make, he had almost 30 years in. He knew he could never make E9 without going to Vietnam. And everybody, generals, would come into his office and beg him to take his application out and not go and not go. He went anyway, and of course, 3 weeks later, he was dead. You know, I guess we'd all do it. But of course, 49% of us would be saying, for God's sake, don't go, and 51% would be saying go. But
Well, that's when you got a job or joys of an officer that sits behind the desk and he has no field training, and he gets out there and he wants his next promotion. He doesn't care how many people he kills, but he wants that next promotion.
We all had those.
They gotta get that ribbon.
My dad was in the Navy in World War II in the South Pacific, and he never talked about it. I never heard him talk about his duty when I was growing up, but in his final years, I did sit down and talk with him and asked him to tell me about it, and I was writing it all down as he was talking, and he was glad at that point to share it, you know, and now I have that history to
Yep.
pass on to our children, but he never talked.
There used to be a class in, I believe it was middle school, and it was Mark and Barbara White, and it was called America. It was a combination of English and history class. And as you went through American history, when you got into World War II, in that time frame, your assignments were to go out and interview veterans from Nantucket. And I was very fortunate. I was the only person I know that got to interview Buddy Blair. And then I also had Bob McGrath, and I'm trying to think who else, and talk about the stories that I got out of those two alone. But Henry Stafford, I know, was interviewed, and I don't think they have a class like that anymore.
That's a good idea.
And because, you know, everything, teaching has changed, and it's,
Well, Gunny and I used to go when they got, what grade was that? High school, right?
High school,
When they got, in American history class, when they got to the Vietnam
Right.
War late in the spring, Gunny and I would go in and talk about the Vietnam War from each of our perspectives.
yeah, I remember Gunny coming in from my class, actually.
yeah.
So, it was
And
interesting.
Patrick, don't you go and talk to a class for the
I-
veterans?
So for the last, I don't know how many years, 10 years or so, my sister Rosemary is a third grade teacher, and I've always gone and spoken to her class around Veterans Day. And this year I brought a young man, Nantucketer Hollis Webb, who was a Green Beret, who did a lot of high-speed stuff in Afghanistan. And he was lucky enough, I was actually hoping he was gonna come today. He just had a baby 5 or 6 days ago, so he's concentrating on his son. But Hollis came with me, and it was great. So I spoke to the third grade, he spoke to the fourth grade, and then together we spoke to the fifth grade. And I really just kind of turned over to Hollis, but I've been doing that for a long time, and I've spoken not only to the elementary school, but also to the Nantucket News School. They had me come once or twice. But the high school doesn't do any, because they're so worried on whatever that standardized
MCAS
testing
test.
is, just,
They
it's all
gotta get all
MCAS,
that
they can't
stuff out of the
learn.
way. They don't have time for
They don't,
stuff that
can't
might
worry
help
about
them.
history, they have to worry about MCAS.
Anybody got anything else? I just want to let you know
One
that,
more thing.
okay,
They have fair winds here on Nantucket.
Yes.
Maybe if they could form some kind of a veterans group for you guys,
I want to say they started to, and I'm looking at Bert because that was part of what we were doing with Holidays for Heroes, but I can't remember how that all went
No,
down.
they don't do it because I'm on the contract with you committee, and they come to us for money this time of the year, and they're not, they made no request for anything in that area.
There's also this girl, Carrie, that works down in the state, she was in Marine Corps doc. She's all tatted up, she's pretty cool.
it took a guy named Ralph Hardy, which some of you know. He's a veterans agent here in the island. Him and I have worked for years to get even a doctor to come over here. Now we have a doctor that comes over, Dr. Van Gerber, comes over once a month of Providence. and comes here to the island for the veterans and stuff. Our next mission is to do something with our head, get something over here that we can have our young men and women talk to somebody and help them.
We're finding out that a lot of the suicides, well, a fair amount of suicides, I should say, are because of TBI, traumatic brain injury, and then CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And what it is, it's damage to the brain. It's the same thing you hear that's happening with football players. And it's just that disconnect. Literally part of the brain dies with all the explosions that we're exposed to, whether it's the roadside bombs, whether it's the tactical missions blowing doors and throwing grenades and all that. All that has an impact on the brain, and it's constant. And if it's multiple tours, it just slowly erodes the brain, and it doesn't really rebuild. The process to rebuild it is quite amazing to hear how they do it now. Taking hallucinogenics, sitting in a room like this, and you're on this 8-hour trip, basically, the way it was described to me, this Navy SEAL I spoke to. And he said it's like looking at an iPad of your life, and you're just flipping through the images as you're on this drug, and you're out of it, not talking to anybody. And when you get to that traumatic event, you have to process it in your brain, and then you get through, and it starts flipping through the next series of photos, and you do all that for 8 hours or so, and then they start giving you other drugs to start to rebuild the brain. The process is quite long and extensive just to try and put the brain back together. And I think that's a big cause of why you see the suicide rate as high as it is. So.
Anybody got anything else? We have some young ladies back here that have set up some snacks and food and cake and coffee and tea and a couple of beers, and you're welcome to it.
Thank you very much.
Who would have thought